So my name is Jiggy. My name you might have seen is Jigyasa. Don't call me that. It's really hard. So Jiggy's totally fine. I know I'm standing between you and beers at this point, so I'm going to try and make this quick, short, sharp, and focused. So firstly, thank you. This idea came up because I was having a conversation with one of my friends at a bar. We were having a nice, strong whinge about how enterprises make it so bloody difficult to ship good stuff out the door. And he was saying, you know, there's a conference coming up, why don't you just put your idea up? Because I was saying maybe we should do this and maybe we should do that. So that's really the inception of this idea. My presentation in no shape or form is supposed to be preachy. I'm not pretending that I know it all. I've been in the industry now for 6 to 7 years, so this is my perspective after being in the industry. So a little bit of background about myself. I spent a good about 6 years in a large, Australia's biggest insurance company with the banking arm. So I did about 3 years in data and analytics, and then I moved into the digital world. In the data and analytics space, at the time they were moving their data warehouses into one data lake, so a lot of time and effort went into that space. And when we moved into the digital world, a lot of it was about experiences. But the one thing that kept baffling me is there's this obsession that's taken over the industry about being fast. We need to be fast. And when we ask about why do we need to be fast, it's all because, oh, someone's going to beat us to it, or there's a competitor out there. But what I'm really struggling to understand is why is this obsession there to be as fast? I personally don't think it's fair. Someone said to me, this is the slowest we're ever going to be, and I agree. But I think we're now in a position to start questioning how fast do we really need to be. So here's a little bit about why. I'm a big believer that software engineers aren't just builders anymore, and software isn't just a commodity. There's a huge amount of power that every single one of you has in this room right now, and I don't think there's not enough perspective around it. So I was watching a video about a Google engineer who was saying that they were doing whiteboarding around how they need to do notifications. And someone was saying we should put some customers into default notifications so they don't get out of it. And one of those ideas was that, you know, when someone's sitting down and having dinner with your family, there is that vibration that goes off on your phone. Whether you like it or not, that happens. And this person said, you know, this is the power that we have now, that the smallest change that we do make on an application, it can impact thousands and millions and billions of people. And never in the history before has anyone had so much power. Like, all of you have got access to all the latest platforms and applications. Someone can go and create an app, and next thing you know, everyone's using it. But with this power comes a lot of responsibility that I don't think we're fully realizing as a society. So now I'm about to walk into, I guess, what my 9 principles are. Again, they're not supposed to sound preachy. This is just my perspective on if we did do some of this, I think it would be helpful. So firstly, I have worked in an Agile first organization, and if anyone ever tells you that Agile is about going fast, tell them to stop right there, because it's not true. Agile was never designed to go fast. Agile was always designed because we had big waterfall, chunky pieces of work to do that we would do for 3 years, get it out into the market, and the customers would turn around and say we didn't even want this in the first place. So Agile came in around 2000 to help us get feedback and to adapt. It never came into the picture for us to be as fast as we can be. Which sort of goes into my second point. Agile is not about doing. I'm now a consultant, so I'm working for a tech consulting company called ISN'T. So I'm at a lot of client sites, and a lot of them, when I walk in, will tell me, we're Agile, we do Agile. And I'm like, that's fine, don't get defensive about it. And then I go, cool, just start showing me around. And the first thing they say is, we do stand-ups, and we do retros, and we do planning sessions. And the minute they say that, I go, ugh, not anywhere remotely near what Agile is supposed to be. Agile is a culture. It's a mindset thing. It's how you perceive problems, it's how you look at solutions to those problems, and it's how you work as a team to solve them. Whether you do stand-ups or not almost becomes irrelevant at that one stage. So I'll give you a quick example. I ran recently a waterfall project. I was made to run a waterfall project. I'm not a waterfall advocate, unfortunately. And what happened was the product owner walked in and he said, I want all of this. And we said, well, we're not going to do it all. And he said, no, it's not up for negotiation. Here's your budget, here's your scope, and here's everything that needs to be done. Needs to be done by June 30th, in time for the investors, for us to do a showcase to the investors. It didn't happen. And it didn't happen because there was no points of feedback throughout that entire cycle. This conversation happened last year in August, and this year that app did get released out in the market. But unfortunately, because we didn't go out there and get feedback from the customers or internally, we didn't spike things, we didn't build small things that got bigger, it wasn't right. And we did do stand-ups, and we did do retros, and we did do planning sessions, but it almost became totally pointless. So if anyone ever says we're doing Agile, start having to think about, well, what's doing versus being? Because if you're being Agile, if you're adapting to the change around you, if you're constantly looking at your backlog and asking yourselves, is this still the right feature to build? Then that's success. Doing stand-ups only is not going to be success. And I just wanted to put this in there. I think, often when the Agile conversation comes up, people almost forget. I won't go into the details, but the last one I think is very relevant, which is responding to change. That's the reason why this framework came into the picture in the first place. Who here knows about Moscow? Can I get a show of hands if anyone's heard about it? Okay, some people. Good. So this is a fantastic way, Agile or not, forget about the Agile concept. This is a great way to force the customers to ask, what is it that you really, really want? So I'll again give you 2 examples. When this doesn't exist, that's the example that I just spoke about. Chunky work, fixed timeline, fixed scope, fixed budget, go out there, do it. When it's all done, come and let me know. It doesn't work. 3 months ago, I was facilitating a workshop. So for the insurance company that I was talking about, we're redesigning the entire quote page. So it hasn't really been done in the Australian market. So the product owners came to the workshop, and inevitably they're like, we've spoken about the user experience. This is everything that we want, and nothing is negotiable. And so what we did was, instead of showing them this, we started breaking the pieces of work down. Okay, progress bar is going to look like this. Pricing engine is going to talk to when the customer wants a quote. That's the integration point. We broke everything down. And then what I did was we put it up on the wall, and then we asked the customers, go and put down M next to the features you just cannot live without. Like, we literally cannot go into the market without it. Inevitably, they walked in and M on everything. And then you have to keep asking them, can you really not go live without a progress bar? Like, if the progress bar wasn't there, can you literally not go live without it? Well, we can. Well, it's not going to look good. And we have to keep reminding them it's not about looking good. Make it work first. The prettiness of it will come afterwards. That project now, I have left the organisation, but that project I know is well on track now, only because what they did looked a little bit like this. They broke the work down, and they know exactly what are the bare bones we need to get out into the market. That's the must-haves. If we did do that, how are we going to iterate on top of it? Okay, that's prioritised now as the should-haves. Could-haves are also, is it going to get there or not? Depends on timelines and budget. Won't-haves, they're probably never going to make it, and that really annoys the business stakeholders. But it's okay. We need to annoy them, because if we don't annoy them, the customers aren't going to get what they want. And so it's picking up your battles. So this one is, in theory, I guess it sounds simple, which is just keep your code simple. Can I get a show of hands of how many of you guys here are software engineers? Heaps. Test engineers? 1. Any business analysts in the room? None. Project managers? None. Great. I have only done development for about 3 months in my entire career, so I will say definitely that I'm not the best when it comes to preaching about the best practices, but I have led a team of software engineers. So for the last 2 years, I was a team leader. I had a team of 40 people, 20 onshore in Australia directly reporting into me, and then 20 in China, and we had a distributed pod squad. Often software engineers will come in, and software engineers are very creative-minded people. They solve problems, and the good thing about engineering is there's not one way to solve the problem, there's multiple ways to solve the problem. What sometimes used to happen was we used to give the feature work, like that's the feature, we need to go off and develop it. And some of the engineers would get extremely excited by, oh, okay, we're going to put this on clouds, we're going to use all the suites that cloud has given us, make the solution almost a little bit more complicated than it needs to be. And what happens is, there's enough churn in our industry. So that software engineer would leave, the next one would come in, he'd look at that and go, I have no idea what this code is doing or is trying to say, because it's so complex. And also, something that I used to say to my team back then is your code, whether we like it or not, is the legacy you're leaving behind. And when you start thinking about it that way, just keep it simple and keep it non-complex so someone else can come in and read it. And when it does get handed over to someone else, they can maintain it moving forwards without feeling overwhelmed about what's been given to them. Who here actually is part of a DevOps squad? One person, that kills my mind. Why? It's 2018. I know that we don't really have a lot of influence. I was lucky that I was in a position to make decisions. So I walked in and I said, none of this develop and then throw it over the fence to another team to look after, and there's hardly good communication between the two. So I kicked off 3 years ago a full DevOps pod in my company, in my team. This happens a lot, and I know that you guys might not have the power, but start having the conversations around it is what I would highly, highly recommend. We know that teams who build and then own that build, they're far more responsible. Would I be right in saying that? Yeah, because you understand the pain of maintaining something, and it goes back to my previous point about keeping things simple when you are designing a piece of software. DevOps, there's various levels of maturity out in the industry, but in theory, it's really, really simple. If there's an application, you build it and you own it. And that means you're doing all the enhancements on it, and you're also doing all the maintenance, the patching, ensuring that you're on the latest versions of stuff. Your team's looking after it, and you're doing that in your backlog as you're prioritizing that piece of work. It's not difficult. There's various good articles out there. If you just go type in DevOps, there's heaps of stuff that you can read about. I highly encourage you to just on the bus home or on the train home, just have a browse of it. And if there is a coffee conversation next time in your organization, just spark the conversation. I'm sure it will travel. Whether I like it or not, there are a lot of managers who will say, I'm not technical, I don't understand anything. Well, we need to start having conversations with those people as well, because in our world right now, there's no such thing as I'm not technical or I'm technical. We're all impacted by technology, and everyone really needs to understand it. Am I going okay for time? Yeah. Okay, cool. This is probably one of my favorites, Convey's law. I'll give you 2 examples. So when I was in the waterfall project that I absolutely hated, it was a pod. So my pod, there was an iteration manager or a scrum master on top of it. Then there was a project manager. Then there was a program manager. Then on top of that, there was a program architect. Then there was a program director. I have no idea what the program director even did. Now, the architect walked away and said, okay, cool, we're building a new platform. I'm going to go away and come up with a solution. And he did. He came up with an end-to-end architecture of how things were going to hang, how we're going to integrate it into the cloud. And essentially what he did was he came to the team and said, here it is, I've designed it all for you. Go away and build it now. And of course the team's gone, what the hell is this? No one's consulted us on this. We are the most experienced people in building microservices and APIs. So why weren't we engaged in that conversation? And then, so that was one project. And then the other project was a pod, a scrum master on top, and there was an overall architect. They were looking towards a microservices model, and what that team did was, okay, we're going to come up with our version of what the solution should look like if we were to move to this platform. And then they just ran it past the architect, and he said, here's some feedback points, and here's some feedback points, but mostly tick, 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 tick. It goes without saying, which team do you think was most successful in delivering that piece of work? I often say what the customers get on their app or their page, or when you call up the call centers and they go, well, I need to transfer you to this whatever team now, or you need to go to the credit card team now. What you're witnessing is a system that's essentially reflecting the organization. So again, I fully understand that you guys aren't in the in the power to change everything, but it's having those small conversations that's going to start to move the needle a little bit. This is probably my favorite. So I have been a project manager before, and I've been a scrum master before. And if you are in those roles, you deal with some really weird stakeholders. Projects never go according to plan. There's something always happens. Someone gets sick, someone has to go to hospital. We thought that this dependency would be done by now, and it's not. Projects always run behind. As long as there are humans involved, things will never go according to plan. And the first thing people run up to project managers and say is, well, okay, we'll go and get more people and that will solve everything. And it still baffles me why we're still having this conversation, because I used to keep saying it still takes 9 months to make a baby. You can keep throwing people on it. It doesn't change the outcome. And what I would say to the developers who used to be in my team back then is to, directly have that conversation with the stakeholders. This whole process of middle management sometimes gets a bit annoying. So push back, because, you inevitably will be part of projects where stuff's falling behind, and then someone will say, okay, well, I've just hired 10 consultants now. We're going to come and do this piece of work with you guys. And often you guys will be sitting there going, that's a really dumb decision. Tell them. Because I think more people need to call this out, saying that, the minute you start throwing people on it, then there's more coordination involved. Admin takes over, and then you've got 20 people working on the same repo, and there's more coordination about deploying stuff into production rather than, 6 people just focusing on the task at hand and building up their velocity. Fail forward. It's easy to say, let's have a safety fail environment. It often doesn't exist. I've been part of both. And when the safety fail isn't there, I've seen and I've been part of it myself where engineers would start blaming each other and, well, he asked me to do this, I didn't do this. Or often you'll hear phrases like, can I get that in writing? Yeah, when someone says that, that just means there's no trust in that team whatsoever. And safety fail, yes, there's an organization thing, but at the same time, you can build that in your squads. When someone fails, just learn from it, bring that up in your retrospectives, ask the question about what could we have changed, what could we have done better. I've been part of both, and the ones where there's a safety fail environment, the team often fails together. They learn from it. Their morale tends to be so much better. And I've also seen people almost taking a bullet for each other as well. And that's when you know this team has got a really, really strong knit connection. And those projects tend to succeed far more than where there's, can I get this in writing, and let's wait 10 hours writing stuff up in emails and sending it around. This is my last one. Has anyone heard of a thing called FedEx? FedEx, okay, cool, good, one person. So FedEx is an idea that was introduced in my previous organisation by the CIO. It was hugely valuable, and the reason why he brought that in as the term called FedEx is the company FedEx on its own promises that they will ship the product to you within 24 hours. So there's a level of commitment there. What this allows engineers to do is we used to stop work for literally 24 hours. So Thursday, 12 p.m., we'd stop all work on our projects. We'd tell the stakeholders to bugger off for 24 hours because it didn't matter what the outcome of the project would be. 24 hours won't make a difference. And then the team would say, these are the problems that we see in our organization. It could be anything. It could be customer facing, it could be internal, it could be ServiceNow, it could be anything. And then they'd get into little groups of 3 people or 6 people, depending on how big the problem is. And they would come up with a working demo of how to solve that. The only caveat is you have 24 hours. So you have from 12 p.m. Thursday to 12 p.m. Friday to work through a working demo that would mitigate the problem that you have experienced. There's plenty of beers going around. There's plenty of pizzas going around to keep the creative juices flowing. And then in this picture at around 1 o'clock Friday is when everyone would come together. There is a PowerPoint ban, so you cannot have a PowerPoint presentation. And you have to talk about why did you think that was a problem and come up with a solution. And normally it's a very quick demo. So that photo up there, they were using the AWS facial recognition to provide a quote for health insurance. And we picked our smallest health product that only asked you 3 questions to give you an initial quote. It looked at my face, my wrinkles, my skin color, my height, and it determined behind the scene there was some algorithms playing, and then it said this person, we could give them a health insurance for X amount of money. Now, really small, but the fact that someone demoed this, it was a group of 6 people working on it, shows that, you know, there's some legitimate reason that we could potentially deploy that into production at one stage. I did ask myself, why is it that I'm sharing this to software engineers? And I was having this conversation with Raph whether what I wanted to talk about is even relevant to you guys. And I think it is, because every single one of us in this room is playing a role right now in the society. Technology has never been as advanced as it is today. We are going at an incredible speed. And so we all need to be having some conversations, and either we can focus on our circle of concern. You know, my manager's rubbish and the CEO doesn't understand anything, and there's plenty of reasons to complain about, and I used to be in that bracket when I started. But I think the more we focus on, okay, what can we do to influence some good stuff around us, whether it's taking another engineer out for coffee and bouncing off some ideas, or having a chat with your team leader and saying, heard about this thing called DevOps, maybe we should have a small go at it, can you give us a couple of months to at least trial it? If it all falls apart, we'll just go back to how things are right now, but at least give us a chance. And if every single one of us started having some conversations around that, I think the stats are still like 71% of the projects fail. That's a lot of money that's going to waste and people's time. But if everyone just had small conversations like that, I think we can see some improvements. Very lastly, this, I think, defines why I came up with this. So I've always had a philosophy that position doesn't define power, impact defines power. And like I said, I think the amount of power that all engineers in the world have right now is immense, unparalleled to something we've seen before. So use that power wisely and start having more conversations around some of the stuff that we can start doing better. I hope you found this useful. It definitely wasn't a tech talk. Enjoy your beers.